Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Marin Communications Forum. I'm Michelle Fideli from First 5 Marin Children and Families Commission, and here today for our forum on e-cigarettes and the vaping epidemic. And thank you for joining us. Sorry that we have that we're gathering under such bad news, but obviously it's a very important issue, and we're really looking forward to an informative session today. I haven't seen the latest updates from the CDC, but as you may have seen in the news over the last days and weeks, I think the CDC has confirmed well over 1,000 cases of serious lung injuries due to e-cigarettes and vaping. And the last I saw, there were 19 confirmed deaths, but that number may be going up. So we're going to learn more about that today, and also learn what's happening in the community while we're waiting for confirmed information and action on the federal level. We're going to learn, especially from a lot of our youth, about what's being done to inform and educate and encourage people to stop using e-cigarettes. So we're going to begin with the Youth Leadership Institute, and we have a group with us today, and I think we're also going to have some video for you.
Actually have to stand up there.
Yes, you can come here if you want. Do that.
Cool. Thank you, Michelle. Good morning, everyone. My name is Wendy Pacheco. Again, I'm a program manager at the Youth Leadership Institute. And it's very inspiring, actually, to see so many people here on a Monday morning gathered around a tragic issue, but also to see that folks really care. There are adults in this Marin community who care about our young folks and who want to ensure that we're doing anything and everything that we can to empower young folks to think about the decisions that they're making, but also to be really aware about the impacts of vaping and what's happening currently as it relates to young folks in Marin County. The Youth Leadership Institute is a statewide organization that's dedicated to creating relationships between adults and young people to drive positive social change in their communities. We believe at the Youth Leadership Institute that oftentimes the waters that we're swimming in, the things that we can't see, is adultism, meaning that we don't always give young people the chance to speak up on their experiences and to trust that they have a sense and a capacity to understand how they're being impacted by the issues that are coming up in their communities. And so one of the programs that we run at the Youth Leadership Institute is the Marin County Youth Commission. And the Marin County Youth Commission is a political body of 23 young people all across the county that are charged to be that voice for young people, that are charged to really think about what is impacting young folks. Every year they address alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs prevention. And one of the reasons for that is that Marin County is higher than the national average as it relates to young people engaging in substance use. And so we recognize that as a part of the Youth Commission, it is an issue that we should be addressing on a year-to-year basis.
Can you talk just a little bit slower? I'm not
Totally.
I'm sorry.
No. No apologies, that's totally okay. That's the one piece of feedback that I receive all the time, and so I will definitely do my best to be more conscious of slowing down. And so, again, the Youth Commission is a political body of 23 young people, youth ages 12 to 18, who are given the opportunity, the task, the responsibility to say, this is what young people in Marin County are facing. This year they are addressing mental health, racial equity, to alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs prevention work, as well as sexual health and wellness. And as I mentioned earlier, I just want to repeat that every year they are thinking about alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs and the way that it impacts young people on their school campuses. Typically, it would not be me as an adult speaking up here, right? My role as an adult ally is to empower young folks to be the ones to speak on their experience. Unfortunately, there were a lot of folks who could not make it today and who are sitting in class right now, but we did do our best to try to bring in that voice into this space. And so we do have an audio from a young person, Joshua Rowe, who has served on the Youth Commission for the last 7 years and has been one of the strongest leaders to really push this work forward, and has led a lot of work in talking about vaping and addressing the social host ordinance and bringing along peers and his friends to make sure that we're really having this conversation. And so without further ado, I will kind of pass it over to Cyrus to play Josh Rowe for us, because he's here in spirit.
Okay. Josh, you can share your memory. I think the best way to describe vaping would be like smoking 2.0. It's just as bad for you, it's just as addictive, and as they did in years past, tobacco companies have used advertisement campaigns targeted at youth to hook them onto their products and make them extraordinarily successful. From my experience, in my school environment, I've been fortunate enough to not have had my education negatively impacted by vaping, but I have worked on a subcommittee that really investigated this issue in the public schools. And what we found was, especially concerning from the policy standpoint, the California Department of Education had strong recommendations in place for public schools to either expel or suspend students caught vaping. And this creates and this puts teachers in a very big predicament. Because when they catch a student vaping, they have to make a decision. Are they going to pursue the disciplinary route and have really negative repercussions for this student, or are they going to keep nothing? Because that's the only option they have left. And so I think that as we tackle the issue of vaping, it's really important to consider how the public schools respond to it. And okay, I'm Joshua.
Okay, so I got a lot of feedback that it was super echoey, as I mentioned before, and so I'm going to go ahead and summarize his points. But part of why I brought in the audio, knowing that it's still a little hard to hear, is that, again, at YLI, we really do believe that bringing in the voice of the young people is super important. And so we took the time to have a conversation in the Youth Commission and felt that it was very necessary to bring that into this space. And so Josh Rowe touched on 3 really important things. The first thing he said is that e-cigarette companies are targeting young people, and that when we engage young people in that kind of conversation about the ways that people are making money off of addiction, off of advertising to them in particular, I think there's more empowerment there to say, I want to do something about that, because I'm actually, smart enough and intelligent enough to make decisions if I'm educated, but I'm being advertised and targeted in a way that doesn't always give me that kind of agency to make that decision or to be a part of that change. And so he really wanted to name that. And the second point that he makes is that schools do not have a uniform policy as it relates to vaping. I do not work on a school site, but I do recognize that vaping, for me, came out of nowhere. I just kind of heard it from one day to the next, and I was hearing that middle school students, high school students were engaging in vaping in school bathrooms. And I was like, wait, what is a vape? What does it look like? I'm really confused, yeah. And so one thing that the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Other Drugs Committee did last year on the Youth Commission was look at school policies across Marin County to see what it is that schools are doing in response to catching students who are vaping or finding any kind of paraphernalia on them on school grounds. And what we came to realize is that there isn't a uniform policy, right? That schools are doing different things based on their own communities to see what makes sense. And a lot of the time, teachers are being put in a position where they have to address this and make a decision on the spot about whether they're going to suspend a student or expel a student. And right now we're in a time, I think in the education realm and in social emotional learning, to understand that suspension and expulsion are not working for our young people, and that we have to think about restorative ways to engage them in thinking about the decisions that they're making. And so one of the recommendations that Josh Rowe and along with his peers said is that we need to figure out restorative justice practices and how can we connect to organizations in the community who will support with the cessation process as well. Because vaping became a trend, but that doesn't mean that young people are no longer addicted to nicotine. And so we really have to focus on that as a part of the issue as well. And again, the last thing that he mentioned was about teachers being put in a position to deal with something that they might not feel prepared to deal with in making a decision about the future for this student based on this one incident, knowing that young people are addicted and are being really impacted by this as well. So with all of that said, Josh is here in spirit, and I'm hoping that I communicated what it is that he wanted to say. I want to lead us into a Kahoot. And so I'm going to ask that you all take out your cell phones. And again, normally in these kinds of spaces, we ask you to put your cell phones on silent and be very attentive, but this is a way for us to interact and engage. So if you can pull out your phone, and Sarah, if you could just click on that link. Thank you. All right. So our first question is, the Food and Drug Administration lists e-cigarettes as an official smoking cessation aid. Is that true or false? And if you think it's false, you'll select the triangle, and if you think it's true, you'll select the diamond. Okay, and the results are in. And so 29 folks answered the question correctly. That is false. So the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, does not list e-cigarettes as an official smoking cessation aid. So there are myths around thinking that vaping and using e-cigarettes is a way to quit smoking, and the Federal Drug Administration says that's not actually true. Cool, thank you. It also scores you. Don't worry about the scores. We're not here to judge anybody on how much they know. This is a learning experience, so don't worry about the score. I took this, I think, 3 times, and the second and third time, I still was like missing a few questions. So our next question is, on average, how much nicotine is in a Juul pod? 5 cigarettes worth, 20 cigarettes worth, 40 cigarettes worth, or 60 cigarettes worth? About 5 seconds. 27 people said 20 cigarettes worth, but it's actually 40 cigarettes worth. So 1 Juul pod is equal to the amount of 40 cigarettes. Yeah, it's a lot. Miss A. Golden? Cool. Question number 3. If you vape, you are how many times more likely to start smoking cigarettes? Are you 2 times more likely to start smoking cigarettes? 4 times more likely to start smoking cigarettes, 6 times, or 8 times more likely to start smoking cigarettes if you vape? A few more seconds. 22 people answered that correctly. You are 4 times more likely to start smoking cigarettes if you vape. And so it's very clear that vaping is a gateway into smoking cigarettes. Cool, next question. Okay, Jazzy. I see you, Jazzy. Yeah. Cool. By 2017, how many unique e-cigarette flavors were researchers able to identify? Over 500, over 5,000, over 15,000 flavors, or over 20,000 flavors? It's a huge range. 20 folks answered over 5,000, but the correct answer is researchers have been able to identify over 15,000 different kinds of flavors for e-cigarettes. And I think the closer number is actually towards 17,000. I'm looking at Elaine because Elaine has it. Which is unbelievable. I don't know how many flavors you can actually mix. How does that make sense? Anyway, cool. Next question. Which of the following chemicals have been found in e-cigarettes or vape pens? Formaldehyde, arsenic, lead, propylene glycol. And I hope I pronounced those correctly. Everybody was correct. It's a trick question. You can't be wrong on this one. So every chemical up here, formaldehyde, arsenic, lead, and propylene glycol, have been found in e-cigarettes and vaping. So that's how toxic it is that young people are putting these chemicals into their body, yeah? Jazzy's doing great. As of October 1st, how many cases of vaping-related respiratory illnesses have been reported across California, across the state of California? Is it over 20, over 40, over 80, or over 100 cases? Twenty-two people were correct. Over 100 cases of respiratory illnesses have been reported as it relates to vaping across the state of California. So that does not encompass the rest of the nation, and so that means that that number is that much higher. And I think right now we're at over 400 cases across the nation, if I'm not mistaken. Over 1,000 now? Wow, I haven't been watching the news clearly, but we're at over 1,000 cases now. And so it's really disheartening and really alarming, but this is why we're all gathered here today to have this conversation, so we can figure out ways to address this. Awesome. We have 3 more questions to go. Big tobacco company Altria owns what percentage of Juul? Is it 5%, 15%, 25%, or 35%? And the correct answer is 35%. And so this question is important because if big tobacco companies have a stake, quite literally a stake, right, stock, money, financials, an investment in Juuls, that means that they're looking at profiting off of our young people. Always follow the money, because that tells you a lot. Okay, question 8 out of 10. So individuals who use smoke e-cigarettes in order to quit nicotine end up smoking both traditional cigarettes and e-cigarettes, quitting traditional cigarettes for e-cigarettes, or quitting both traditional cigarettes and e-cigarettes. So what happens to young folks when they start smoking e-cigarettes? Smoking both traditional cigarettes and e-cigarettes, right? Earlier I mentioned that it is a myth that a vape pen serves as a cessation aid for smoking cigarettes. In fact, it actually causes you, or becomes a gateway to smoking actual cigarettes. So yeah, thank you. And then question 9 out of 10. What city was the first in the United States to ban the sale of Juuls and other e-cigarettes? Was it New York, San Francisco, Boston, or Los Angeles? Livermore? San Francisco, yes. So, or Livermore was
The night before, but
The-
it made too much.
got it, right. So Livermore and San Francisco were the first cities in the U.S. To pass a ban on e-cigarettes and Juuls, and so the Bay Area is again leading in, trying to figure out what solutions we can use to make sure that young people do not have access to these kinds of things. But I'm sure after San Francisco, a lot of cities across the U.S. are following suit. Cool. All right, question 10 out of 10, we're almost there, team. As of September 2019, how many countries around the world have banned the sale of e-cigarettes? How many countries have banned the sale of e-cigarettes? 5 or more, 10 or more, 15 or more, or 20 or more? Twenty or more countries around the world have banned the sale of e-cigarettes. And so this isn't just a movement in the Bay Area, it's not just a movement in California or the US, it's worldwide, right? We're recognizing that young people right now are falling into the traps of nicotine and e-cigarettes, and it's having a huge impact on their school experience and their health. And so thank you for participating and kind of moving along in that Kahoot game with me. I'm hoping that we all learned something. I know I took this a few times and learned every time something new because I kept getting them wrong. But nonetheless, I hope you took away something from this game, and I will stop talking now and you will actually hear from a young person. So Adriana Golden is a student at the Branson School, is also a part of the Youth Advisory Council, and is a part of the Youth Commission and a part of a whole host of other things. One special thing that Adriana did was lead research about vaping and nicotine. And so I will, without further ado, pass it to Adriana and let her speak a little bit more about that experience.
Good morning, my name is Adriana. I'll wait for the slides to get worked out. As Wendy mentioned, I joined the Marin Youth Commission this year, as well as the Youth Advisory Council, and I'm a senior at Branson. And so today I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the research that I've done on the health effects of Juuls in collaboration with some scientists at UCSF. Okay, here we go. Thank you. So without getting too bogged down in the details of the experiment, I'd like to just give you an overview of the kind of testing that I was able to do during this study. So I designed the study so that I could look at the specifics of individual types of e-cigarette liquids and examine different aspects of those liquids and how they impacted the health of our innermost lung cells. So think back to high school biology class, maybe you took an anatomy class. The alveoli are the little grape-like clusters, the very tiny, tiny air sacs in our lungs, and that's where the gas exchange takes place. So when we take in a deep breath, those cells at that epithelial layer are where the oxygen molecules will deposit and enter into the bloodstream, and the carbon dioxide that we're ready to expel will enter our lungs at that point as well. So unfortunately, if someone is vaping, you know, these cells will be where all of those terrible chemicals are going to deposit. The nicotine, the solvent, the flavorants, those are all going to deposit onto the alveolar level. So I used human alveolar cell cultures as the model in this experiment because it's the most realistic representation of how our lungs actually receive the chemicals from e-cigarettes. So I exposed these cells in the lab for 24 hours to different kinds of e-cigarette liquids and different ingredients that we find in those e-cigarette liquids. And afterwards, I gave the cells 48 hours to respond to that shock. And afterwards, I measured the cell death levels. You can go to the next slide. So this is kind of an overwhelming graph, but along the x-axis, you'll see all the different kinds of e-cigarette liquid that I exposed the alveolar cells to, and it's graphed against an index of cell death. Real quickly, the way I measured the cell death was by measuring the level of a certain enzyme or protein that was released into the cell media. So the idea behind this test is that the higher the level of the level of enzyme you find in the cell media will be proportional to the amount of cells that died. So here, the higher bars, the higher levels of cell death would indicate a more toxic e-cigarette liquid. Okay. Oh, sorry, could we go back? I was going to explain the graph. On the first bar, where it says 100% media, that is sort of the baseline healthy level of cell death. So you can compare all the other bars against that one as the control group. So the first thing I'd like to draw your attention to is the second bar from the left, which says PGVG. And in the vaping world, that's propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin. And this is the solvent into which the nicotine salts, into which those flavorants are dissolved. So this will be found in any e-cigarette pod, whether it's the sort of new on the market THC vapes or just classic nicotine vapes. This will be present in all of those products. And propylene glycol is essentially antifreeze. It's a synthetic organic molecule, and vegetable glycerin can be thought of as your canola oil. It's a vegetable fat. And so a huge misconception with youth is that the vapor from the e-cigarettes is vaporized water. And so of course it seems harmless. Oh, it's just flavor and water. But actually it's really noxious synthetic organic molecules. I've told my friends, this is antifreeze, and everyone is really surprised to hear that it's not water. So here we can see the plain vape liquid with no nicotine, no flavoring, just that plain solvent, more than doubles the level of cell death, the healthy baseline cell death. And that's really concerning because it shows that it doesn't matter how much nicotine or what you add into the vape. The liquid itself will have a baseline level of toxicity to our lung tissue. The next three bars, 10, 30, and 50 milligrams per milliliter of nicotine. Unsurprisingly, when you increase the concentration of nicotine in a vape, the level of cell death goes up. This confirms pre-existing research that nicotine is a highly corrosive chemical to soft tissues. And then the last four bars are from Juul products. So I tested the mint flavor and the Virginia tobacco flavor because these are some of the only flavors left on the market. You might have heard that Juul has been pressured to withdraw its fruit flavors. It previously had flavors that were really attractive to youth, flavors like tropical mango and creme brulee. So thankfully those are off the market, but that's why these were tested. So one thing that was interesting for me was that the freshly mixed vape liquids, so that the 10, 30, and 50 milligrams per milliliter of nicotine in the vape liquids, those clearly had much higher cell death levels than the manufactured pre-made Juul pods. And so this shows another discovery that the freshly mixed vape liquids are going to be a lot more potent in their toxicity than manufactured e-liquids, because those chemicals are going to have more time to degrade. But when they're freshly mixed, the data shows at statistical significance that it's going to cause a much higher level of tissue corrosion to our lungs. So this is new information and could possibly be another realm for regulation, because right now people can go to a vape shop and get the ingredients to make their own e-liquids in the privacy of their own homes. There's no one regulating this, and so they could be mixing potentially really, really dangerous liquids. Thank you. Okay, I just have two illustrations for sort of qualitative data, these are human alveolar cells under the microscope. When they were treated with mint Juul e-liquids at 3% nicotine, you can see these aren't healthy cells, but at least there are more of them, and they appear to be confluent. There's growth on the edges, but just raising the percentage of nicotine in that liquid by 2%, you can see the growth of the cells has decreased significantly. There was a much higher level of cell death. And the same pattern was visible comparing the 3 and 5% nicotine groups for the Virginia Tobacco Juul product as well. Okay. So in conclusion, just to summarize, I was able to conclude from the experiment that the plain solvent, propylene glycol vegetable glycerin itself, is highly toxic to the epithelial level of our alveolar cells. Unsurprisingly, higher concentrations of nicotine cause higher levels of cell death and corrosion within the lungs, and that freshly mixed vape liquids are going to be more potent and more cytotoxic to our lungs. There's a lot of information about what flavor is healthier for you. The data that I collected on tobacco and mint was inconclusive, but more studies will be done on that for sure. So it's wonderful. I mean, it's terrible that we've gotten to this point, but there's a lot more money now, a lot more grant money out there for research on Juuls and e-cigarettes. And so just the scientific community will keep gathering information and trying to just gather that information that could be necessary to educate and empower the public to make safe decisions for themselves. So now that we have all this information, it's time to talk about how to act. So I will hand this over to Wendy from YLI. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adriana. Adriana Golden, make sure you remember that name. I think since it's college application season, I hear that Harvard has sent her right on to Harvard Medical School. So that was excellent. Thank you.
And really quickly before we close this section, we just wanted to make sure to have a call to action at the end of this conversation. And one of the things that we were asking is that everybody in this room talk to one young person in your life and share something that you've learned today. Hopefully through the Kahoot game, there was a really interesting fact that you're like, oh, this is really important to share with young folks so that they know. And so we are asking to please have a conversation with a young person in your life to talk to them about the conversation we are having today. A lot of them are in school right now and aren't able to be here. And so it's our responsibility as adult allies to really provide that information to them. And invite young people to be a part of the Marin County Youth Commission's Alcohol, Tobacco, and Other Drugs Committee public meetings. And so while the commission there's an application process to be a part of it, it still is a public body and we have public meetings. And so if you do have young people in your life that think could benefit from being a part of the solution and thinking about how to address this, please send them over to the Youth Commission and we have space to make sure that they can have their voice heard. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Wendy. Now we're going to continue on, and very glad to have the Marin County Public Health Officer with us today, Dr. Matt Willis.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. It's awesome to be here with you today. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for your interest in this important public health issue that we're facing as a community. I know we're a little behind, and I'll go quick. I'll talk as fast as I possibly can. Fred, okay, yeah, Fred will call me out. That's true. But a lot of what I was planning to cover, I think, has actually been really effectively addressed by our previous speakers. So I'll just allude to some of the health implications. One of the things I think that's most important for us in grounding our conversation is understanding kind of the local impact here in Marin County, the burden in Marin among our youth of vaping rates. This is the results of the California Healthy Kids Survey, which is administered yearly. We get, these are actually every 2-year results. There's a lot of different bars here, but what I want to call your attention to is the gray bars represent 2015 and 2016, and the blue bars are 2017, 2018, for 7th, 9th, and 11th graders with regards to any vaping use, and then regular vaping use. And the most important that I think for for us to pay attention to is right here. These are high school juniors. In 2015-16, 11% reported vaping regularly. In 2017-18, that number jumped up to 28%. So we saw more than doubling, almost a tripling in the number of our high school 11th graders vaping on a regular basis. So if vaping were healthy, that would be great, because almost 1 in 3 are engaging in that. Unfortunately, if vaping is harmful, that means 1 in 3 of our Marin County juniors are experiencing that harm. And we'll talk about, and you've already heard, some of what we know about the actual harms. So this is an important piece of our call to action as a community. Next. This is just the actual latest update from the CDC. They're updating every few days regarding the vaping-associated pulmonary injury. You know, when Michelle and I and others talked about hosting this forum a few months ago, that was before any of this vaping-associated pulmonary injury had come to light. And all the more important reason for us to be having this conversation now that there's been more than 1,000 cases across the nation, 18 deaths with more fatalities under investigation. About 80% of those cases, or 78%, reported they had vaped a THC-containing product. But importantly, that means about 1 in 5 did not report vaping a THC-containing product. We're investigating 2 suspected cases here in Marin County. And once those are confirmed, if they're confirmed, we'll be issuing a press release and having another cycle of important dialogue here in Marin. Next. So this is what the characteristic of this pulmonary injury is for chest x-ray. So one of the criteria that we have to look at when we have potential cases in Marin is everyone needs a chest x-ray or a chest CT. And these are the kinds of things we're looking for. And this is a patient. This was published by the CDC to help guide clinicians in their diagnosis. This is what the patient looked like after they had recovered. So this is more or less normal lungs, right? X-rays, when it's air, it comes across as black so that you can see bones, right? That's the purpose of an X-ray. So you shouldn't see white space in the lungs. What that means is that those lungs are full of fluid. And that is what leads to death. So those 18 individuals who have died in the nation died because they're no longer actually able to those alveoli are no longer able to exchange oxygen because the lungs are full of fluid and inflammation and irritation. So that's what vaping looks like. And we have one case that has a chest x-ray similar to this here in Marin. Next. This I thought was an important point also, which is, you know, early in this process, Juul and other sort of, you know, manufacturers were saying that people should avoid, you know, off-market products. The problem is, and that obviously makes sense from a marketing standpoint, but the problem is that we don't know yet what the source of vaping is. And in fact, this is from the latest CDC guidance to clinicians for the products to look for when you're interviewing your patients about what they might have experienced or what they might have used. All of these products have been implicated among patients that have come in with injury, including, importantly, there's Juul, right? So we cannot say that standard, you know, vaping products are safe yet. So this message that you really just should be avoiding the off-label products is premature. And it also offers some of the sort of implicit, you know, like learning here. Look at the name of some of these products: Chronic Carts, Moon Rocks, Cookies, you know, Mario Karts. I mean, these are, we talk about not marketing to young people, but these are the names of these products that people are using. And a lot of them are nicotine-containing and not THC-containing products. Next. So this is just to orient you to the, I think most people by now know the variety of different kind of containers and products that are used for vaping. The flash drives that are up here for this presentation look incredibly like many of these products here. And I heard one of the parents saying, I don't know whether that's my kid's homework or whether that's a vaping product. Next. I'll touch briefly on cannabis because, partly because, you know, 1 in 4 in 5 cases of vaping are associated with THC use, but it's also an important and increasing source of cannabis use among our youth. These are the cannabis vaporizers. Next. So cannabis is not, those of us, the adults who are policymakers and making a lot of these decisions have an image of cannabis that is out of touch with the reality of cannabis today in a few ways. We might picture it as a plant, right, as leaves with a THC concentration of, few percent. Now it's a totally different game, right? These are all the different substances that THC can be concentrated into and consumed. And I won't try and get into them because I myself can't even keep up with them. I did a Google search, Google search recently of how do you dab shatter? Because I'd heard people doing something called dabbing, and then I heard the word shatter. I'm like, I don't know the noun or the verb in that sentence. And I go to Google, right? I can't go to the CDC. So that we're completely out of the normal way that doctors like to get information about health harms. Next. So this is an important point, which is the THC potency has increased significantly, right? Smoked cannabis was about 11% compared to 3% in 1990s. So this is sort of more Mendelian, they're just concentrating, finding the plants that have the highest concentration and breeding them with other plants. So the concentration just keeps getting higher in the natural products. And then there are medical grade cannabis products with even higher concentration. And then the concentrates that have up to 80% THC. If you can just go back to that last slide. There are a lot of conversations happening in San Anselmo tonight, talking about storefront cannabis, Novato, later in the month. One of the most important points for us is that we know these high concentration THC products do increase the risk of early onset psychosis in young people. And that is not a theory. That's been demonstrated. And it's important for us to sort of just recognize that as we move forward as advocates in our communities in these conversations. A study came out in May of 2019, published in Lancet, that said that 3 factors increase the risk of early onset psychosis with regards to cannabis. One is regular, daily use. The second is starting before age 15. And the third is concentrations above 10% of THC. So that's under-recognized as a reality, and I think something that we need to sort of claim and understand as we move forward. Next. So I think there'll be more presenting on nicotine as brain poison. Should I? We have some time to catch up on. Just go to the next. This, I think, is kind of a fun reality for when we talk about adolescence and youth. Prefrontal cortex, right? That's where we plan things, you sort of understand context, you can sort of decide, well, maybe I shouldn't do that because that's probably not going to be good for me in the future. That kind of stuff, that part of your brain, especially in males, develops later. And sometimes never really fully develops. Compared to the limbic brain, right, which is your flight or fight, that's your emotional, right? So you have this really vulnerable piece in your adolescence where you've got all of that limbic activity, which is driving your decision making, without that prefrontal cortex coming in and being wait a minute, whoa, that sounds fun, but that's dangerous, right? So that's what we're dealing with when we're talking about working with adolescents, which is why policy is so important, because we need to categorically protect them from even exposing them to those substances, because the decision-making, just as a normal developmental stage, is impaired. It's amazing we even survive through that phase. All right, next. I'm going to end with this, which is just, this is a study that showed that the addictive properties of different substances, how addictive they are at different concentrations, to compare. And I know this from my own clinical practice. As a primary care doctor, I had patients who smoked, might take cocaine, opioids, alcohol. And often the most difficult thing to stop using was the smoking, among all those things. And here's some science that supports that. What this shows is the amount of dose that people regularly concern, and then the dependence potential. And it shows that nicotine, the only things that have higher dependence potential is heroin, but even that's at a higher dose, right? So nicotine there's caffeine, marijuana, ketamine, alcohol, lower dependence potential than nicotine. So nicotine is objectively one of the most addictive substances of any kind. Next. I think others will talk about these other factors. Next. Next. This just says that these are all different, this is already alluded to, all the different substances that are found in vaping pens and aerosols. Next. These are the amount of nicotine that are contained in different products. So Juul, 1 Juul pod, about 41 cigarettes worth. Next. And there's the different substances in Juul. Again, and I'm pointing at Juul because they have been one of the most popular products and also have been most vocal against some of the policies that we've been addressing. Right now, there was a question about San Francisco being the first city to ban the sale of, that is not yet in the can, right? We still need to maintain vigilance around that because Prop C is a proposition to actually reverse the city council's decision to ban e-cigarettes in San Francisco, and that will come to a vote in November. So we need to make sure that we're messaging in that community and in our community of the importance of actually going through with what the city council already decided to do to protect their community. Next. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to continue with some more youth perspective, and you're welcome to take a seat. There's a microphone for you that's ready to go. Did you guys want to sit or stand? Whatever. I think it's stand. Okay, here's a microphone for you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name's Evelyn Bailey, and I'm a senior at Temescal High School.
I'm Cassidy Rogers, and I'm a senior at the Marin School of the Arts at Novato High.
Hi, I'm Senta Ritter, and I'm a senior at Sanderville High School.
And today we're going to be talking about the marketing behind vapes with a teen perspective. Oh yeah, so to start, we're going to show like a little video just to...
Carefully though, you might miss what it's advertising. It's this little thing, and it's called Juul.
Juul looks more like a flash drive or a computer device, but it is really another kind of e-cigarette.
Since it launched in 2015, Juul has taken over about 70% of the e-cigarette retail market share. It's now worth about $16 billion, and that success is often attributed to its sleek design. But the same features that make Juul a well-engineered product also make it attractive to young people, many of whom have never smoked before. And that has people worried, because devices like Juul might be designed to help smokers get off cigarettes, but they're also addicting a new generation to nicotine. So what makes this one e-cigarette so different from the rest?
Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is some of the ads that are on the internet. And basically, the ones shown up here are the Juul ads that were actually taken down because they were advertising towards youth. As you can see, most of the people in these photos are, around our age. And yeah, they had to be taken down. And so basically, one of the big problems with advertising is just that, even if there's all these laws, you can't advertise to the youth, you can't, youth can't buy nicotine products, it's still able to persuade them to buy the products through advertising. And what they want to do is ensure lifelong buyers. And by doing that, they advertise to youth. And if youth can get addicted to juuling, they are basically guaranteed to be addicted their whole lives. And here are some of the ads. Well, these aren't even ads. They're literally just storefront products. And basically, whenever students or young kids will come into a gas station or just a store to buy candy or soda or something, they see this, and they see these colorful products, the Juul pods, the Juul cartridges, and it looks pretty nice. Like, they'll see it and be like, ooh, I really want to try that. When really, like, there's terrible addictive chemicals in these, and I don't think that kids really understand the harms when this is what they see in a store. Like, they don't understand it's bad for you if they just see this.
Okay, so now we're going to be talking about social media. So these are all ads that people like us get on a regular day basis. So this is actually a screenshot of one of my friends, and this is like an ad that they got on their phone. You can see here, that's a photo of like the mango, and like that's really appealing to youth. And those are young people, and it's just kind of shown how like Juul is like ingrained in our culture. So these are some more posts. So on Snapchat, a lot of kids will obviously like take videos of them juuling because they think it like makes them look cooler. And then also like Juul dealers will post all the time saying like going fast, like I only have like this amount like of mint or whatever it is. And there have been 15,000 Instagram posts relating to Juul. And half the posts focus on youth culture or lifestyle-related content that would appeal to teens. Also, influencers and celebrities. So these are people that a lot of teens probably follow on social media. So that's like that's Drake from Drake and Josh. Wait, no, Josh from Drake and Josh. And these are just headlines from like BuzzFeed about people who vape. Those are like models. Yeah.
Okay. So now I'm going to talk about the impact of advertisements specifically for flavored products. So it's clear that most of the products shown up here are advertised towards kids. They come in lots of colors and different flavors, including mint, mango, cucumber, chocolate, grape, strawberry, and bubblegum, or just to name a few, and then donuts up there too. And as we saw earlier in the Kahoot, there are over 15,000 different flavors, and that's still counting. And we also know that according to the California Department of Public Health and the American Journal of Preventive Medicine, 4 out of 5 youth who start using tobacco products start with a flavored product. So flavors are really the way that the tobacco industry is hooking the next generation of addicts. Additionally, it seems like the flavorings might actually make e-cigarettes more harmful. In a recent study, saliva, urine samples of participants that were using flavored vape products and some using non-flavored vape products were collected. And the conclusion was that the flavors increased the amount of carcinogens found in the participants. And in addition, a number of other studies have found that the flavorings used in e-cigarettes are linked to serious health issues, including toxic effects on lung cells, which is also what Adriana showed us. These include popcorn lung, inflammation effects, and negative effects on the immune system. And you can go to the next one, Jazzy. Okay. Many of the flavors we see are generally recognized as safe by the FDA, but this status refers to safe for consumption, not inhalation, which has very different effects on the body. The stomach is able to break down some of these chemicals from the flavors. However, when inhaled, they just sit in the lungs and have a negative effect. Here we can see some of the Oh yeah, okay, so here we can see that some tobacco products even contain the same ingredients as candy. A study published in the New England Journal of Medicine showed that the same chemicals used in cherry Jolly Rancher candies, Lifesavers, Zots, and Kool-Aid were found in similarly flavored tobacco products. So overall, we see that the tobacco industry is creating these kinds of candy-flavored tobacco products in order to really target the youth population.
Thank you. And Jazzy, were we going to take some questions now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Adriana, you want to come up?
So we've learned a lot already, but maybe you would like to ask the experts.
Does this
So
one
when-
work? Yeah.
Yes, we wanted to give you a chance to ask the teens.
Yeah. So one thing that we were thinking is we have a bunch of students here and they're ready to take questions. If you guys have, each one of you has a notepad in front of you, if you could write questions there, and then we'll have Wendy from YLI will be walking around and she'll collect some of the questions and bring them up here. I have some starting questions and I'm going to introduce the people who are sitting here next to me. So first we have Cassidy Rogers, who's sitting right here. She's a senior at the Marin School of the Arts at Novato High School. She's also a part of the Youth Advisory Council out of Marin Healthy Youth Partnerships, and she's working on various projects, especially with an upcoming event next week with Nick and David Sheff around the book High. Next to her, we have Evelyn Bailey. Evelyn Bailey is a senior at Tamascal. She previously attended Redwood High School, and she was a TUPE educator, that's Tobacco Use Prevention Education educator, for the past 3 years. And she's been an intern and member of the Youth Advisory Council, where she focuses on vaping specifically as her topic. Next to her is Senta. Senta is a senior at San Rafael High School. She's working with me as an intern through Marin County Health and Human Services, and she's a member of the Youth Advisory Council, focusing heavily on policy surrounding flavored tobacco products. She's been very vocal at city council meetings. She was key person at the San Rafael City Council moving forward a flavored tobacco ban. And then lastly, Adriana Golden. She is a senior at the Branson School in Ross. At Branson, she runs cross country and leads the medical club and Model UN and dances in the dance and performance ensemble there. She also conducted her research project, which we heard about a little bit earlier, on the effects of e-cigarette liquids on lung cell tissue. And she got first place in the California State Science Fair. And she's gotten recognition from the American Association for Clinical Chemistry. So we've got some very amazing people up here. And so some of the things that we've talked about and parents are having a lot of trouble with is they want to know kind of what's going on. What is this vape culture that's happening here today and at different schools? So we're going to start off with just starting off and talking about what does vaping look at your school and with your peers? Is it as big of a problem as people think it is? And whoever wants to start talking about your school first can go for it.
So for the past 3 years, I went to Redwood High School, which is a big public high school in Larkspur. And I would say freshman and sophomore year, definitely vaping was like really, really big, and especially because freshman year, like you're super new to everything. There's a bunch of new kids. Like you don't really know where you fit in. And so like having the Juul like there kind of made that situation all like really confusing. And I would say as you go like from freshman, sophomore to junior, just people get addicted more. So you see like regular users. And I would say it's a little bit more like sad because you see like they really can't help themselves. And I think it was just scarier freshman year because these people that you've known for so long like start getting addicted to something that you don't even know what it is.
Yeah, I remember my freshman year, like my first experience, like seeing vaping was these two girls that would always sneak off to the bathroom and vape, and I was just like, what is this? What is going on? Because I had never seen that in middle school, so that was
Okay, so it looks different at every school, so it's very unique that we can have students from all different schools up here, and so we're really lucky to have that and work with all these students so we can know what that culture looks like. So where are high school students getting access to vaping products? Is it difficult? Where are the key access points where young people are getting these things?
One of my close friends became addicted to nicotine through Juuls, and I was very curious to know, where are people getting access to these, because I think that's something that should be really heavily regulated. But at least according to this friend, certain stores in San Francisco in particular will sell to youth without checking for an ID. And of course, this makes it easy for people to also go buy in bulk and then resell at their schools.
Yeah, I would definitely say buying in bulk, and I know also people figure out how to buy them online, and that's also a big source of that.
Okay, so we have a couple questions that came in from the audience. So how has the lung illness outbreak affected conversations that are happening at school? Are people changing what they're doing at school, or are they kind of continuing with these habits?
So I've noticed that the lung disease outbreak has really started to scare people, but I don't really think it's really changing anything, because I remember the other day I was having a conversation with some friends, one of whom is addicted to juuling, and she was saying, like, yeah, I think the scariest part about the lung disease outbreak is that it doesn't even scare me at this point. Like it's just, it blew my mind, because I look at her and I'm just like, I don't know, but you think about it, and they're addicted. They're dependent on this substance to get through their days. They can't go more than like 10 minutes without hitting a Juul, getting a head rush, because that's what addiction does to you. And some people are so addicted that it's not even scaring them at all. They're like, well, this is my life. Like, we'll see what happens.
I think another part of that is the idea that it's, people do know that the Juuls are dangerous, but it's the problem that it's cool to do something that could hurt you.
Yeah, I actually think most people or a lot of people seem to know that it's bad and see the negative effects, but they've just somehow accepted that and they're like, okay, well, I'm doing it anyway. Like, yeah.
Yeah, also, just to add on, I think that people know it's bad, but I just don't think they know how bad it is and how they could be the one in the hospital.
Okay, all right. So what have each of you seen being done by your school administrations to combat the vaping epidemic, if anything? Are there measures that are being taken at school to make a difference? Do you guys have any comments on how the schools are handling it?
At my school, we started the tobacco use prevention education. So me and I think 15 other kids who are all upperclassmen, we give a 45-minute presentation to each freshman class, and we make it really fun and interactive and really open up conversation, not just about juuling, but the life that surrounds juuling. So through that, we've been really trying to educate.
I believe there's also a group at my school that does that too. I'm not really involved in that as of now, but I think there is that. And then obviously it's not allowed, you're not allowed to vape on school grounds, but I do know that people sneak in their cars or off in places.
And as far as that goes, the program that Evelyn's involved in at Redwood, or was involved in at Redwood High School before moving to Temescal, that program exists in all the public high schools in Marin County and 4 of the middle schools. They have tobacco use prevention education programs that is funded through the state tobacco program. Okay, so I have a question for you, Cassidy. What are the consequences for those who are caught vaping at Novato High School, if you know? And do you feel like the school should be doing more to address it?
Yeah, so I just transferred to Novato High School this year, so I'm still getting acclimated to this new environment. But what I've noticed is that during breaks or during lunch, they do have a security guard kind of walking around the parking lots where a lot of kids sit in their cars and vape. And usually if a kid is caught vaping, they'll receive a detention, which honestly, I would assume why aren't they suspended or something? But I just think that sometimes even the adults working at this school have kind of been forced to accept, like, okay, these students are addicted. Like, we can't just be like, stop being addicted and it'll go away, you know? But yeah, I think that the punishments aren't as harsh as they should be.
Awesome. And then I guess this is a question for anyone who can answer. I guess what's the going rate for buying a Juul pod or a couple Juul pods, if you know? I know that at retail price, you can get 2 Juul pods for $15, so I don't know if it's higher or lower that you're seeing around at different campuses.
I think it might differ for when students are reselling from bulk purchases, but online from the Juul company itself, I know this from purchasing for the science project, I think it actually might be a 4-pack for $15, but some students are going through, you know, a pod a day or even more, so that money does add up very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to?
I know also, I saw this letter from a past senior at Redwood, and in order to become in good standings to graduate, he had to, our teacher asked him to write a letter about what it was like to be a Juul dealer, and he kind of talked about that. Yeah, it was super interesting. And he talked about how he would take advantage of people with addictions, and he would sell it to them for like $30 more, or he would sell it to freshmen for super expensive because the freshmen don't really know.
Okay, so are students vaping before or after school, or are they vaping during class a lot? So what's like more common? Are people vaping before school and after school, or are they leaving class to do it at school?
I think that honestly, like, if you get to the point where you're addicted and reliant on a Juul or any vaping device, like, it doesn't really matter what time of day. Like, I know some students can get away with vaping in class because they blow the smoke through their sweatshirt, or they can zero it, which is a term that basically means like sucking all of the smoke into your lungs and not letting it come back out. And yeah, it's terrible. So I know people do it during class. People will say, I have to go to the bathroom. People will say, I'm having anxiety, I need to leave, when really they're having Juul withdrawals from just within a few minutes. And yeah, it's crazy. Some teachers have rules about how often you can go to the bathroom, but I know some kids will like sneak their way through it. It's an emergency when really they're just going to vape. And every day at lunch you'll walk past cars, it's just like smoke filling up the cars. And yeah, it's like, it's not just like a certain time of day, it's whenever you can.
So along that line, I know you just mentioned like people doing it in classroom and like holding in the vapor. We have a question on a couple slang words. One is, what is, I know that that's called zeroing out, but what is ghosting and what is getting domed? If you guys know. I know, so I can answer if you don't know the answer, but.
Okay, well, ghosting is basically where you'll inhale the smoke and then you'll let it come out and then you'll suck it all back in and basically zero it at the end. And it's like a cool vaping trick that people will do, like competitions. Sometimes they call it like baseball, where they go around in a circle and see who can hold it in the longest. And yeah. And then what was the other term?
Getting domed, so that's...
Oh yeah, getting domed is just getting like a really big head rush where like basically the oxygen is cut off from your brain, so you get a kind of tingly feeling that some people really enjoy the sensation, but it's terrible.
Yeah, it's not necessarily good for your body. Okay, I have a question for Adriana. It says, I noticed that one of your slides said that cell death was greater with just PGVG than some of the Juul products. Why do you think that was the case, if you know?
Yeah, there are a couple of possible reasons for that. That was really surprising to me as well. One is that I believe Juul uses a 60-30, that doesn't work, 60-40 ratio for PGVG, and I was using 50-50. That could be a possible source of error. The flavor addition could have changed like the pH of the liquid. There are some little differences like that could explain it. But again, it could also be that the freshly mixed liquids, even without bringing in other chemicals, are more potent because This is just a known fact. Any chemical, when it has more time and no access to, airflow, will degrade, and so that could be a possible explanation as well.
Awesome. Okay. I have a handful of questions right here, and we're going to go through them because they're all pretty similarly related. What are some signs of vaping so that parents can spot those signs early? And what do you think we as a community can do to help young people support them, quit, or help them not to start in the first place? So some of the signs and symptoms that you notice of people who vape, and then kind of what you would like to see in the community to help prevent that in the beginning, or some harm reduction approaches. Any thoughts?
I can speak on the prevention. I think that it's really important that we start having this conversation before it becomes too late. And I think it's important to open up the conversation to everyone and have everyone at the table. And I think that we need to really look at the facts and just think of ways to better support them. And signs for vaping, I would say, obviously, if you see that the kid has a Juul, it's probably theirs. If you see a little tiny charger for it, that could be a clue. If they're just not acting normal, kind of jittery. Yeah, I don't know.
Where did students go when they want to quit or go for treatment? Does anyone know if there's cessation education that's happening in the school?
I can take that. So at Branson a few years ago, there was an all-school assembly about how the vaping epidemic had appeared at Branson and how students were juuling in the bathrooms. And I really did like the way Branson approached this. They said that if you were struggling with a nicotine addiction, you could come forward to the administration and they would help. It was implied that they would help get counseling and other resources. That punitive measures would only come into play if a student was caught hiding that. But if they came forward to get help, they would be able to get that support. And so as far as I know, that program is still in play at Branson.
Awesome. Okay. So what would you recommend teachers do to get more information out about the facts associated with vaping? Is there more that you think could be happening in the schools?
I think just more mandatory education surrounding it, especially for maybe students that didn't come in freshman year and go through get the 2P education. Because I know, especially at San Rafael, there are many new students who might not know the facts about this and would be vulnerable to becoming addicted. So just more education, going into more classes more frequently.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we only have time for one more question. But what is the best messaging, talking points that's effective for teens to understand how bad is vaping? And we'll end it with that. What talking points are most effective when working with young people and educating them about this topic?
Okay. I think obviously when you talk to youth about this epidemic, it's nothing to you shouldn't look down upon youth just because they're a part of this generation. I think it's really important that you use facts, show the evidence, show all the other kids that thought that they wouldn't get sick, and then show them now, and show them how this could have very easily been any one of us who had juuled. Yeah.
Also, I think, I just don't like the idea of being targeted by the industry and taken advantage of almost. So I think maybe if we show kids that, I don't want to let them target me. Then.
I also think from a young age we were kind of educated on the problems with cigarettes just because the generation before us had a lot of issues with that, and we were young, we were in school, and we were learning about don't smoke. And I think that if that starts happening with nicotine vaporizers and THC vaporizers as well, then it could, start the same thing where we know from a young age, don't smoke. It's just what you learn in school. It's just what you know, like, yeah.
Yeah, I think the message really needs to get out too that vaping is not even better than smoking, because people
Exactly.
still think that all the time.
To break down that normalization factor. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for answering all these questions. We have a couple more, but if we have time at the end of the forum, we can address those. Or if you guys have questions, you can feel free to come up and talk to the students later. Awesome.
That was amazing, and thanks to all of you for the work you're doing. We're going to continue now and hear about some of the anti-vaping campaigns that have been developed. We have Ann Alisco-Lemmy from Duncan Chan in Advertising.
Hi, everybody. I think that I am going to walk away from today's meeting with an incredible quote that I honestly wasn't expecting to hear, which is, the thing that scares me the most is the fact that I'm not scared. That's huge. And I'm sitting with my partner, MJ, over there. We do a lot of, as was pointed out, anti-vaping work for the state of California. And I think that quote has so much power. It speaks directly to what I'm going to talk about today, which is nicotine equals brain poison. I am also a parent of 2 teen boys at TAM, so this is very personal to me as well. We began working with the state of California, the Tobacco Control Group, in 2015. And as you can imagine, the lion's share of that work has been around educating the public about the dangers of teen vaping. Just to give you a sense of how fast this moves, and I'm sure most of you already have that sense, but when we were looking back on past work, we realized the very first campaign we did for them, which was called Wake Up, trying to get the public to wake up about the dangers of vaping, which was 2015, Juul wasn't even on the market. PAX was, but Juul was not. It wasn't even featured in our first round of campaign work for the state. Do you mind going? So this is a quote from Michael Russell, who was one of the early harm reduction pioneers in tobacco control. And essentially what he said when we were starting to understand the dangers of smoking is that people smoke for the nicotine, but they die from the tar. And this really stuck, right, for decades. And really what it did was give nicotine a hall pass for a very long time, because people thought, oh, there are way scarier things than cigarettes. You know, the tar is going to kill you. Nicotine is just the thing that the tobacco companies put in, so it makes you want to smoke. Do you mind going? In reality, when you talk to people about nicotine, and I think the conversation shifted a little bit over the last few years, but often what they will say is, well, it's just kind of like, you know, you need your coffee in the morning, or you need your chocolate. You know, it's that kind of level of addiction. Is it really, really that much worse? Come on. You know, it's not going to kill me. This is a quote from a parent that was, this parent said this to me in 2016, that he really wouldn't mind that much if his kid vaped. Come on, there's so many things that are worse out there in the world. Is this really that big of a deal? And parents have a lot of worries. There is no doubt about it. Social media, bullying, academic pressures. I mean, ask any of these students about academic pressures. Gun violence, going to school every day with the specter of that hanging over your head. And all of this is driving to such astronomical rates of anxiety and depression and stress and suicide. So yes, teens have a lot to worry about. Parents have a lot to worry about. How in the world is vaping nicotine a worry, right? And this is what Matt was getting to earlier in the day. And what we know now is that when it comes to nicotine and the adolescent brain, it is just the beginning. Addiction is just the beginning. It has so many more devastating effects on the teen brain. So what are those? You can go through these kind of like 1, 2, 3. So it affects the areas responsible for attention and learning. Attention, you're in a class, right? And you're trying to pay attention and you're having nicotine withdrawals. You cannot pay attention. It affects learning. Grades start to suffer. It increases anxiety, mood swings, and irritability, all of those things that we just talked about, those list of concerns. Nicotine exacerbates all of that. And you mind going back one more? And it makes it easier for them to get addicted to other things down the road. So this is nothing to play around with. This is not like your morning coffee. Okay, now go ahead. And so essentially, when you look at the scope of all of the worries of the teen brain right now and all of the worries in a teen life, and then you go and add something like nicotine into their system, it is basically akin to throwing gasoline on the fire, especially when you're talking about something like a Juul pod that has that quantity of nicotine in it. You want to click one more? Oh, do you mind stopping 1 sec? Oh, yeah. So this is going to be, this is a TV spot that we developed, and I want everyone also to know that we work with a lot of different partner agencies to make sure that this work gets out in the Spanish language and all of the Asian languages as well. So this is just for the multicultural audience, which is basically like the diverse population of California, but know that this work is going into all different languages as well. This is a 60-second spot that deals with the effects of nicotine and what it really looks like when you're a parent seeing this, or you're a friend watching your friend in the throes of nicotine and nicotine addiction. We wanted to bring that to life in a very real way so people could feel what it is like to be grappling with this. I think the very end of that spot is really powerful when you see that middle school girl saying to herself, it's okay, because that's what kids are saying to themselves, it's okay, and it really is not okay. We have shown a lot of different product in that TV spot as well. You know, sometimes I will hear, aren't you worried that you are going to turn a kid on to vaping? They're already on, you know, I heard somebody the other day, an educator, talk about she's dealing with a kid who's been vaping since 5th grade. So they know about it. It's time for the adults to catch up to the kids. So it's not just Juul, it's Marin, and all of their many products. It's Bo, it's Fix, it's all of them. Nicotine equals brain poison is our shorthand for all of the effects of nicotine on the teen brain, written by that lovely woman over there, MJ Deary. And we really did need a shorthand so people could just hold on to it, because there's a lot of information and there's a lot of science, but ultimately when it comes down to it, it's brain poison for the teen brain. And where is it hiding? It's hiding in all the flavored tobacco products, so don't be fooled by any of that as well. These are parts of wallscapes that were all over, you know, San Diego and San Francisco and Los Angeles. Really, even just, you know, in spaces where you might be walking and encounter vaping. You know, these are the things that we're dealing with. You know, the list of all of the things that nicotine can do to the teen brain. Again, really reinforcing brain poison and how it hides in flavored tobacco. One thing I will point out, it was mentioned earlier that Juul stopped selling mango and some of those other flavors. They didn't. They're still on their website. They just pulled them off the shelves in C-stores, things like that. And then finally, I don't know how many of you have gone to Flavors Hook Kids, but it is the site that was developed for this campaign, meant to be very easily digested, meant for parents to really understand the problem. Also, if we've done our job right, kids can go there as well and not feel like we're talking down to them. You can see at the top there, we bring in recent articles so you can keep up to date. If you want to click through. Knowing the signs, not just if your kid is vaping, but now what are the signs of the illness, the lung illness, because we have to be really vigilant about that, paying attention to those. And then these are just 4 screen grabs, but different ways for you to get involved and take action as well. So writing to your mayors, getting involved in local coalitions. You can download a guide that you can share with different people in the community, with your friends, with your kid, that talks all about the ways to get this to be eradicated. That is the site. I will say one last thing, and we hear this a lot, people will say, well, I'm an adult smoker and I like flavors. And, my first thought is always, at what collateral damage, with the rates of these kids vaping, 15 to 17-year-olds are 16 times more likely to juul than an adult. And 80% in the last year there's been an 80% increase in high schoolers vaping in the last year in 2018. So at what cost? And the thing that I really find fascinating is that the adult smokers are defending the very industry that got them as addicts in the first place. And that, to me, I think that those dots are not connected, because the vaping industry is big tobacco. Altria does own Juul. So I would encourage you, the next time you maybe hear that, is to remind them that they're defending the industry that got them on a lifelong habit. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Really great ads, really, I think, effective messaging, and I'll be sharing that back with everyone, the websites. We want to continue now and have a little more discussion about parenting issues, and we're going to hear from Jennifer Taylor from Jet Ed Consulting.
Good morning. First, I want to thank the Coalition and Marin County Department of Health and all of you for having me here today. My name is Jennifer Taylor, and I'm a therapeutic educational consultant. I'm just going to give a quick introduction of what I do, because a lot of people in the community don't know that we exist. I pick up where your outpatient psychiatrist, psychologist, coach, mentor aren't able to make a difference in the behaviors, mental health and wellness, anxiety, depression in our young people. I work with kids as young as 6 and as old as 25, and I would say 60% of the students with whom I work have some type of substance abuse. And in the last year, I will say that the number of students with whom I work who vape has at least doubled. It is truly an epidemic. Most of my work is residential therapy, so really the time where that critical piece is having the student leave the home to get the help they need. And a lot of what I do is family systems coaching with my parents once the student has left, to help them understand how to talk to their students. And I really appreciate this. Jazzy and I did this talk at Hall Middle School, which is where a lot of the kids are starting to explore what this is. I just wanted to touch base on a couple of things that have already come up before I get into my "You Found a Vape Pen." I just want to thank the youth leadership. One of the things that I do tell my parents is, your youth have a voice. They do have questions. And while I think educating everybody and the youth about the toxicity and the chemicals, the fact that the kids still do it shows that that isn't the only way to stop the behavior. I personally wish somebody who is a person like Kylie Jenner would come out and do a public service ad about how bad it is, rather than promoting how cool it is. I think having that celebrity would help some of our kids realize that it's not cool. I also want to touch on the fact that opioid-induced and marijuana-induced psychosis is real. A lot of my students are having psychotic breaks after doing a lot of marijuana. It is very scary to think that your kid is dissociating because they are smoking pot. But it is real, and it is really tough to handle when you get to that level. And then the first thing I'm just going to say about adults is I often ask parents, what is your behavior and have you smoked pot with your child? You will not be believed how many parents with whom I work say, well, we just went camping and we were around the campfire and we just, I was smoking and, I had my 12 or 13-year-old child with me and we didn't mind. When I do talk with parents, even alcohol, you just have to cut it out. It doesn't mean you as a parent don't have to stop it. You can't do it in front of your kid. I would say the same thing about other substances, but because of the toxicity and the fact that the pot we have now is not the pot that many of us dabbled with in the 70s and 80s, is a huge problem. And I am not afraid to tell parents that they have to cut it out. Okay, so on to how to talk to your kids about what they're doing. And this applies obviously to teachers, counselors, nurses. I know a bunch of you are here. And I love talking about this topic, and I'm going to put my glasses on because I can't see anymore. First of all, if you found a vape pen, the last thing you want to do is act like that. That is immediately going to put your kid on a defensive, immediately have them feel that their behavior is scary, not okay, outside of the boundaries, kind of like it's either right or wrong, which in that kind of what we call black and white thinking isn't going to engender a very calm conversation. If this is you, you need to remove yourself from the situation until you can approach your student, your child. I sometimes say as if they were your best friend. Part of what we're trying to do with our relationship with our kids is that word, relationship. Keeping that intimate relationship in the face of a situation that's scary is ultimately what's going to get you through your teenage years and into that young adult period where having the ability to have a conversation about challenging things is intact. So how do we do this? I'm going to share a story that actually happened in my own family with my sister. She was in my nephew's room and she found a little vape device under a pillow in his bedroom. And she called me immediately, and in my own words, let's just say she was hot. And I immediately said, okay, totally understandable. Underneath this hot feeling, this anger, is a secondary emotion of fear. And that is logical and normal and reasonable, and hold that fear, but that's not where you're going to go with my nephew. So we talked through how to talk about this, and one of the things I told her was my curious question. My favorite tool is a curious question. The curious question, I think that's on the next slide, is a really useful tool in talking about anything. So once you've calmed yourself down, you need to explore with your child exactly what this means to them. So for example, in my own case, I counseled my sister to approach her son when she's calmed down and say, hey, John, it's not his name, it's my son's name actually, I just found this in your bedroom and I'm really curious about what this means to you. And pause. Don't answer. Just keep that awkward silence for at least 10 or 15 seconds because there will be some discussion. It's very hard to stay calm and to pause. The next question might be, very interesting, thank you. Where did you get it? Questions like, are your friends doing it? Have you tried it? What does it feel like? Do you like it? What do you like about it? You can see what I'm saying. You are just trying to develop that curious, relationship-based discussion with your child about, I don't know what this is. I don't know what it means to you. I'm really curious how this fits into our family. And then you can get into family values, which I encourage all parents to talk to their kids about. What are our family values? What does it mean to be in our family? And what are the rules and boundaries we're willing to take? Then you can launch into, okay, I'm not comfortable with this. If we find another vape pen activity device, you're caught. These are the consequences. And then you really have to stick to those. And the consequences can't be so large that you can't keep them, and also they're not in line with what you're finding. A couple of the other tools that I will talk about are more relationship-based. And relationships are the key for that parent-child and teenage development. That prefrontal lobe really isn't developed in new research until 25 years old. We have a lot of time to work with that relationship. You've probably heard of I statements. Again, with the curious statement, curious question, I don't know what this means. And then I'm concerned, I'm worried about what this is. I'm really scared for our family. I'm really scared for you. I feel really uncomfortable. Those really do help anybody that you're talking to take down their defense and understand it's really about your feeling and you're curious about what they feel. There's a technique we use called reflective listening. If you've never tried this, just practice it in a mirror before you try it with somebody else. But it's really mirroring back what you hear. So if your child says, well, I really like it, and everybody in my school's doing it, and I really feel a lot of peer pressure, I mean, if you can get to that point in the conversation, and you reflectively listen back so that you are telling your child you really heard them. You can say, so I'm hearing you say it's really hard to not vape in your school because a lot of other kids are doing it and you want to fit in. You're reflecting back what you heard without putting your own spin on it and judging, right? It's a really non-judgmental way to acknowledge what you heard. So this is leading into the imperatives and the power struggles that you could get into immediately, like the gal with the hands in the air. You can't do this, you should never do this, this is not allowed. Those kinds of imperatives that are just going to push back with a teenager. You can't, which would be in their mind bubble, you can't tell me what to do, you don't know what I'm doing all day long, I'm just going to do it behind your back. Again, engendering that relationship is the goal. And so having those imperatives without first discussing about a value and a fear is what I think is going to make the most sense and make the most inroads. I'm going to skip no advice because I think we got that. And the last thing I'll say is compassion. I think we need to realize, and I really appreciate the panel, this is a really hard situation for kids growing up today, especially with social media and Snapchat. That's where a lot of this is happening on Snapchat. When I work with families and we have our students and my clients leave the home for their mental health recovery, we talk about finding things within their bedrooms, kind of one of my clients said, de-potifying her son's room, is the understanding, and also that if we check our kids' Snapchat's account, which a lot of my parents then wind up doing, the amount of pressure and cannabis and nicotine and vaping related stuff on Snapchat is actually, I think, where a lot of kids buy it, is advertisements and peers giving them access to it on Snapchat. Is the compassion that this is really hard, and to treat your teenager like, again, you would your best friend or your partner, in relaying to them that you know this is hard, that you understand and feel that this is something that is happening in the schools with their peer groups that's not easy to stand up and not do. I think developing that compassion for what it's like to be a teenager, and again, it's reflective listening and pausing and being curious, is what's going to maintain that relationship, and that is what's going to drive any change within your family and within your parenting that I think is going to go beyond the rules, the science. All of that's important, but when it comes to parenting, it's really about the relationship and the tenderness and the ability to find compassion and empathy with how hard it is to be in the schools and not be cool. We all faced it, but it's really different now. So thank you very much for having me, and appreciate your kind attention.
Thanks, everyone, for your patience and hanging in there. Looks like we're going to wrap up early, which is always a good thing. Now I'd like to welcome Bob and Gabby from the county to continue on with what the community response is and what the county is working on.
Good morning. I'm with the county. I've been with the county for probably 17 years, and I was another 10 years working in tobacco control before I came to the county. And I look out at some of my partners that have worked with me for over a quarter of a century, and see Pam and Elizabeth and Theo. Fred Mayer was back there, and Alyssa Ralston, who actually, long before everybody else was talking about the vaping problem, she was out there in our county and surrounding counties and telling people about the concern. If we had only listened to her years ago, we may not be here today. But unfortunately, we are. You know, after 25 years of, in the next slide. Yeah. Nope, back one. That one. We have had a very comprehensive tobacco, very successful program here in Marin County. And it's been successful because we have had, we've looked at everything, taken on policy, education, cessation. When we look at just going and trying to educate our youth, but we're also trying to protect everybody, not just from those who are doing the vaping or the smoking. We try to pass laws to protect people who are going to be exposed to the secondhand smoke. And it's an aerosol, not a vape, a water vape. And so we've passed all kinds of different policies. And there's a list here of our comprehensive program. And we thought we were coming right to the end. And we could actually, at the state level, and especially here in Marin, because we have been a leader in tobacco control, we were looking at the end of this addiction of all of our adults, and we were hoping that there was no more young people who were going to start this habit, that we had gotten the education out there, and we were very pleased with what we have done as a program and as a coalition and as a community. Your leaders, political leaders here in Marin County, have been right on top of everything that we have been doing. You can go to the next. They have worked with our Smoke-Free Marin Coalition. They have passed more policies, I think, here in Marin County than they have in any other county in the state. So we really have to thank our policy leaders because policy is the main thing that we have to do to drive a change in what we are doing in the community. We start with the policy, and that ignites a discussion in the community. And not just looking at tobacco, but if you look at our helmets or our seat belts, or no matter what the policy is that we pass, we have to do the policy before we get a discussion going and we're able to get people to start talking about it and thinking about it and obeying the policy, obeying the law, and doing what is right. And that's what we've done in tobacco control. The first thing we do, we try to get the education out there, but we have to get policies passed. Let me go to the next. We have been, after and before the grand jury released their vaping report, we were out there doing a great job on working with our political leaders and getting policies passed for the vaping. And so what we have done here in the county, and again, thanks to the Marin Coalition and thanks to our policy leaders, we have been able to get every community in Marin County to adopt a policy that bans all flavored vaping products, all flavored tobacco products. And that is a big first step. And yes, you all need to be applauded. Our policy leaders need to be applauded. We have one more community. How many are from Mill Valley? There's one. Okay, we'll see you at, hopefully, the November 4th, I believe, is what we've got slated for our last community to pass a comprehensive vaping policy like the other communities have. Yes?
You don't have San Rafael up there. They did not pass a ban. They passed something for 2 years in the future, maybe, depending on state legislation. There's no current ban in San Rafael. They kicked the can down the road, and so that's
Right.
on your list.
Yeah, and that is true. And all of our communities are pretty much the same. San Rafael was put it out a little farther than the others, but when we go and we ask them to pass a policy, they usually will, working with merchants, and this is something we wish we could get a policy to say, immediately get everything out of your stores. Unfortunately, we have to work with the retailers, and we give them usually 6 months to be able to get rid of the inventory that they have and for the policy to be enforced at that point. And you are right, San Rafael did push it down the road a little farther, and that was because we had about a 4-hour discussion at a council meeting with about dozens of people who were vaping, who said they stopped smoking and this is the new alternative and it's much healthier, and we had to combat that, and we had a lot of great youth who came and spoke and said, no, that's not the case. We cannot allow vaping. We can't allow 80 young people, and this is a study from Dartmouth, 80 young people who will be starting vaping that will, on the other side, we have one person who may start using the Juul to stop smoking regular tobacco products. Are we going to sacrifice 80 youth for every one person who may be able to stop their vaping or their cigarette use by vaping? What we have been doing is trying to educate on the access. What we have done in the last couple of years, we have been able to get extra money from the state, and we have used that money to hire 2 of the greatest educators, youth educators and coordinators that I think we have in the state, and that's Jazzy and Syra. And they have they've done a tremendous job. I know Syra just started, but she's jumped right in, working with a lot of she's right along with Jazzy, with the YAC committee, the Youth Advocacy Committee. And they probably, Jazzy, any idea how many presentations it did in the last year and a half?
We did, I think 54, Kristen knows the exact number, but I think 54 parent eds and like, how many thousand students? 7,000 students?
Yeah. Fantastic. As I said, no one else in the state is able to compare to the great work that our youth are doing. And they've been able to train all these youth, and as we heard them earlier, these youth are out there and trying to educate and work with their peers. In addition to trying to educate and do the policy work, we also are partnering with our enforcement folks in the county. And we have been, for the last 15 years, working with our sheriff's department who goes around to each store. And they have a youth with them who goes in and tries to purchase tobacco products. And because we've had that program, I want to give a shout out to the Sheriff's Department. We have gotten our sales, illegal sales, down to the low single digits. And that is an incredible number. We started out, it was at 40% when we started 15 years ago, of the merchants who were willing to sell to young people. And now the merchants know that this is wrong, and they try to not do what is wrong. The other thing that we are doing is cessation. We know that people who, and we've been doing this for 15, 20 years, Bay Area Community Resources, we've had a great cessation program. Beth Lillard unfortunately just retired, but we are replacing her. We have not only been just working with adults in the behavioral health community, but now we are going to be working and reaching out to our young people who are now, so many of them are addicted to nicotine. So we're starting the whole cycle all over, but we're hoping that we can really move quickly with our education, but also with getting help for those who are currently addicted. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. We have a website, smokefreemarin.com. There's lots of information on there. We ask you to go and look at that. But thank you. Gabby is going to talk about some of our media.
Hello everyone, my name is Gabriela Passat. I work on the tobacco control team in community health and prevention. And today my presentation will focus, just like my colleagues said, on local media campaigns and also on retail environment interventions. And next slide. I would like to say that I do realize that I am in the most coveted spot of the day, speaking to you right before lunchtime when hypoglycemia kicks in, but hopefully my presentation will have enough interesting information that has not been said before by any of our speakers and is going to be interesting and new, so we can all make it to lunchtime. So for local media campaigns, you've already seen Anne's great presentation on the Nicotine Equals Brain Poison campaign and how the campaign came about and all those great materials. What we do at the local level when we design our media campaigns, we have to be cognizant of a few things. So first is the creative. We do work with the state media, creative ads, because they are tested and they are effective, they look great. In addition to that, we have to be also mindful of the state media buys and of the work of our neighboring county, of our colleagues. I am on a work group for tobacco control programs where we talk about what our plans are with regards to media. And the idea behind that being that we want to complement each other's work and say that a person traveling from one county to another should see a continuum of messaging, and the message and awareness should be reinforced with everything they see. And currently the most stringent issue we are dealing with is the vaping epidemic. So here you can see the variety of advertising channels we can work with and some of the ones we employed in the past. Next slide. For the campaign we ran in May through July of this year, we used some of the resources from the Flavors Who Kids campaign, because at that time the Nicotine Equals campaign ads were not available yet. But the Flavors Who Kids campaign, as you can see, some of these ads in the wild, they looked great. They were also tested. They were state-provided media ads. We used them as online banner ads in the Marin IJ. We used them as videos, pre-movie screenings in 3 major cinemas in Marin. We also use them on our social media web pages and on our tobacco control web page that we redesigned to incorporate the messaging from Flavors Who Kids and also the creative. In addition to that, on the left you see a picture of a bus. We ran ads on buses. 20% of the Golden Gate Transit buses in Marin had this ad. And next slide. For the next round, we're always looking to enhance our media efforts and to add new channels to the ones that we employed and worked for us. So next slide. You've already seen these materials in Anne's presentation. These are some of the ads we're going to use in English and in Spanish. So keep an eye out. Starting next month, November through January of 2020, you're going to see these ads on buses, on bus shelters, on our social media, as well as on the posters that we're going to post on high traffic areas in Marin County. And we are going to continue our media efforts into next year, probably late spring into summer. You're going to see the next phase of the media campaign. So this is to summarize everything you've heard today and what were the major contributors of the vaping epidemic. Somehow, the vaping companies, and in particular Juul, figured out a way to lead the horse to the water with advertising, make the horse drink the water with flavors, and kept it drinking with nicotine. The next part of my presentation will focus on what we in public health can do to tackle the issues that pertain to advertising, and especially how they relate to the retail environment. Next slide. So bear with me for this one. You will see that there is a strong connection between the vaping epidemic and the retail environment. The Healthy Stores for a Healthy Community campaign is a campaign that is conducted every 3 years statewide. The state tobacco control program leads this campaign, but they partner with nutrition education and obesity prevention, with sexually transmitted disease control prevention and alcohol prevention, and they work on issues that they identify as common in the retail environment, issues that they can work to tackle together. The goal of the campaign is to improve the health of all Californians through changes in the retail environment. And you can see the main components of the tobacco control vision. I think one of the most important one of them is partnering at the local level to decrease health inequities, because the retail environment is a generator of health inequities. Stores that sell alcohol and tobacco are much more concentrated in areas, in communities that are more vulnerable. So communities who are more diverse, younger communities, and communities with lower socioeconomic status. That is why we all partner together, and you can see in the diagram here, the areas where we identify that there are issues that overlap. In the center, you can see they are around availability, access, and marketing. Next slide. And marketing is especially important for the tobacco industry. For a very long time, they've been focusing their efforts on the retail environment, putting a lot of resources to advertise their products, to make them very available and accessible, and to basically normalize the presence of tobacco in our world. You can see here there's a picture of windows in a store that are basically covered with ads for traditional tobacco, for vaping products, flavored products. You can see on the right how the ads are strategically placed to where a child can see them, so very low to the ground. Next slide. And tobacco companies are putting a lot of money into the retail environment. In 2017, they put about $10 billion just for marketing in stores. And this does not include advertising for electronic cigarettes or vaping products. So that is about $1 million per hour. That's a lot of money. Next slide. What is even more scary, I think, is the number of tobacco retailers. Coming here today, I saw at least one Starbucks and one McDonald's, and we don't have a lot of those in Marin. But for every Starbucks, there are about 35 tobacco retailers. So that's a scary number. So by now you can kind of start seeing that there is a very strong connection between the retail environment and the vaping epidemic. Basically, what happened in the stores contributed to the epidemic. This is more data showing and arguing for that. The Truth Initiative had a survey done where they asked youth where they purchased e-cigarettes and vaping devices, and 74% of them said they purchased them in an actual store. So this goes to them having access to these devices. Next slide. And then there's the issue of advertisement. According to the CDC, 4 in 5 US middle and high school students have seen e-cigarette ads in 2016, and we have reasons to believe that those numbers are even higher in 2017 and 2018. Next slide. So where did they see those ads? They saw them again in retail stores. 68% of them saw them in retail stores, followed by internet, 41%, television, and then newspapers. And that is important because youth are very susceptible to seeing tobacco ads. Tobacco being advertised to them is much stronger than peer pressure. And youth who see tobacco advertisements are much more likely to initiate tobacco use and continue using it. So this is why our campaign matters. These are some of the activities of the Healthy Stores for a Healthy Community campaign. I checked the first one because that's done. Around the state, 10,000 stores were surveyed as part of the HSHC campaign. And in Marin, we surveyed 183 stores. For that, we partnered with youth from the community. We engaged 8 youth volunteers who went out and did the surveys. They did a really great job. Those surveys were very complex, about 30 minutes per store. They had to input the data into a handheld device, and the data went to the state. So they did a really great job, and we're very happy to partner with them. In addition to that, we are right now collecting more qualitative data from key informant interviews and public opinion polls to basically see what is the public support for policy change in the retail environment. Once all the data is going to be in, we're going to analyze it and identify what are the most salient issues for our communities and for Marin. And we're going to start talking. We're going to have a regional press conference in the spring of 2020, and that is going to be followed by a media campaign. Next slide. And just to give you an idea how we don't just do this campaign and forget about it, these are recommendations from the 2016, so the previous round of the Healthy Stores for a Healthy Community campaign. 2 out of those 4 recommendations, main recommendations, were around decreasing storefront advertising and flavored tobacco access. Next slide. And this reflects in our scope of work and in our work public health metrics for the county. As my colleague has already mentioned, only 2 jurisdictions are left, one without any ban, flavored tobacco ban, and one with an incomplete ban. Next slide. This is my last slide, and I would like to end on a positive note, but I'm afraid I can't. This is a new product, a Philip Morris product, IQOS. It is not a vaping product, and it is not a tobacco product. They call it a heat-not-burn product. I don't know if that's true. It does use propylene glycol, just like we've heard e-cigarettes do. And it looks sleek, and I'm told it's being sold in stores that look like the Apple store. That's their flagship store in Atlanta. What is scary, I think, about this product is that it's actually approved by the FDA. It got approval very recently. And this is one of the challenges that lies ahead, including many, many others. In public health, it seems like we can never catch a break. And I've worked in a few public health areas. In tobacco control, I think we have it the hardest. Whenever we think we have accomplished something, and we do accomplish a lot, the tobacco industry is very nimble, has a lot of resources, very powerful. They come up with something else. That's why we have to be working at the local level. Our work is very important. And we have to look forward, and we have to look around us. Our neighbors to the south, to the east, they banned vaping products. So I just want to leave you here and say that our work, your work, is so important in protecting our youth. Thank you all.
Thanks very much. I think we still might have, even after all this information, some final questions, and I wanted to give you all a chance to ask anything else. And I'll start just if I can ask our students again for some clarification and from you, Jazzy. So Juul has cut back on the flavored products, but they're still widely available on the internet. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the Juul products. Yes. Juul products are not available in retail outlets because we have local policies here that stops them from selling flavored tobacco products on the shelf. They are allowed to sell them online, so that's just a clarification. You can order them online as an adult with an age verification process. However, in our local retail outlets, they are no longer selling flavored tobacco products on the shelves. And for some of our jurisdictions, like San Rafael, for example, they will be able to sell those flavored products until January 1, 2021, before their ban goes into effect.
Okay, did anyone else want to speak to that? Okay, and any other final questions?
Just on the online, they just passed a state law for online sales, and that was Senate Bill 39, I believe it was. And what that is going to do, and I think it's effective fairly soon, that if you do order something online, you are now going to have it marked on the outside that it is a tobacco product, and that an adult, just like alcohol, when it comes to your home, it's going to have to be signed for by an adult. So that is something that the state legislature just did, and the governor signed about 2 weeks ago. So that was a great thing.
Thanks, Bob. We have another question here.
So I am actually a trustee for Novato Unified School District, so thank you ladies for coming to speak. My question actually revolves around the education of vaping, and I actually am also a parent. My oldest is a 7th grader at Sinaloa, and I have a 5th grader as well. I'm looking at this, and my advocacy has been to actually educate more in middle school, and I'm interested to hear about that perspective or thoughts. I feel like by the time high school comes around, we've missed a large chunk of opportunity to educate.
I can just touch on that really quickly. Kristen Marcucci, who's over there in the corner, she is the Tobacco Use Prevention Education Coordinator at Marin County Office of Education. In Novato, they have 2 middle schools, both Sinaloa and San Jose Middle School, that both have tobacco use prevention education funding to do tobacco work in those middle schools. And then all the high schools in the Novato district do get some of that training and funding. There's a new coordinator for the district this year, and she seems great, and so we can definitely connect you with her to get more ins and outs of what that program looks like in Novato.
I know there's some stuff, I guess I'm just curious on your perspective, if educating earlier, like I know we have funding to put programs in the high school right now, but I've been pushing to redirect some of it to the middle school. And just your thoughts, if you have been educated earlier, or if you think at that age kids would be more willing to be receptive to it?
Yeah, definitely. Here, I'll let you guys take this. If you had been taught earlier, do you think that it would have been more receptive?
I mean, I definitely agree that the earlier we get the message across, the better, because it's like what you were saying earlier about the cigarettes. Like from a young age, we know cigarettes are bad. We don't smoke cigarettes. But I think if we can get that message across about vaping, that would definitely make a difference. So yeah, I agree with that.
I think the biggest challenge you're going to have is getting the parents on board. There is a real fear from parents of introducing kids too early to these products. And again, as I was saying before, the kids know about them. They know about them as early as elementary school. So I can imagine in a middle school, you might get a lot of backlash from parents not wanting you to talk about it because they feel like Exactly. If they know about it, then they'll do it, which is, we just have to keep chipping away at that mentality because it's not helping us.
Well, actually, in Marin County, in the beginning of September, there were 2 incidents at middle schools. One was Sinaloa, the other one was Miller Creek, where groups of 6th graders got caught vaping. So this goes to the younger education point. For those who don't know, in Marin County, our 3rd year of putting out the parent alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs parent guide. This is direct mail to all parents in Marin County of 9th graders. And the effort was really led by Linda Henn and her group, which I really applaud. Thank you. Give her an applause. In my opinion, this has been a real game changer because it does get something out there to the parents. It comes with a letter, usually from the superintendent of the district. And then last year we had a card in there on vaping. This year there was a card in there on teen suicide and how to work with it. So very important. But yes, I agree with you. And we've had a call to get this out to younger parents of middle schoolers who are asking for this at the 6th grade level because the kids are running into it at middle school. And that's really important.
Thank you. And we have more questions. We'll get to you.
So my name is Arendira. I'm a health educator at Kaiser, and I'm the lead for tobacco. And my question is for Dr. Willis. It doesn't appear that he's here, is he? Oh. So we have in our pediatric department, we have a lot of questions about many kids are coming in to see their pediatricians who are addicted to tobacco, and we don't know how to respond to that. If there are any guidelines anywhere about how to treat these kids who are already addicted. You know, for our adult population, we do have a lot of treatments available, like the nicotine replacement therapies, et cetera. But anyone know anything about any guidelines for anyone under 18?
Yeah, actually, we will be reaching out to you at Kaiser and to Marin General and to Sutter, our health clinics, and our health district. This is one of the things that our grand jury asked us to do. And so we are going to be reaching out. I've already had a meeting with the CalQuits, two state programs, CalQuits, who has set up a great referral system to be able to work with the hospitals, the doctors, to show them exactly how to refer and who to refer to, and they will actually intervene and they will assist on an individual basis how to get that help for all these people throughout our county. So we'll hopefully within 3 weeks, I'm going to be reaching out and we're going to have the helpline, California helpline, is going to run a webinar just for us here in Marin County to address the problem of the vaping and the young people who are addicted. So it's something that we are really going to do as quickly as we can.
And that information will be shared, obviously, once it's available.
I'll be in touch with, and maybe I can get your card before I leave. That'd be great.
Sure. And then just wanted to add that we will be sharing the video from today and other information as it becomes available on the event page for today's forum at marincommunicationsforum.com. And if you go to the events tab, you'll see the one for e-cigarettes and vaping. And so under comments, I'll just post, the video will be pinned to the top, but any other materials that are available, we'll load it there. Also, my email is at the bottom of your agenda, and you're also always welcome to just contact me, and I'll be glad to put you in touch. We have a couple more questions here.
Hi, I'm Dr. Lynn Fox, and I kind of have been in this field for 35 years. I was involved in it many years ago when we were setting up programs in something called drug-free schools and communities that was in every school in the United States. We need to go back to that. We did a tremendous amount in a very short period of time. Basically, in 5 years, we took the problem that we're dealing with today, just like they say, under another fashion or another outfit, but the same old stuff, and cut the drug problem back by 45%. one of the things I wanted to share are some resources that are available to you. The Elks, which you may or may not know about, there are 800,000 of them, and they provide resources that are researched and information like this that cover this information. They, 2 years ago, put out a thing on vaping. It's available free. They give over 8 million pieces away every single year in every area you can think about. And so what parents need to say, how they need to prevent the problem, because that's the real answer. So those are available to you free, 250 of them, for your classes, for your churches, for your community, that gives the specifics and makes it easy. Another thing that we're doing is we're putting on a conference. If you want to know more about that, you may have already seen this little flyer and have some extras. That is going to be a 2-day conference on October 17th and 18th at the Elks Lodge. We have representatives from your fine community as well as people from the state and the national level. And we're looking at this problem, especially marijuana, vaping, and opioids, but alcohol and all the other drugs that we're dealing with, but our focus is on that. And we're bringing together 4 important groups. First, the youth and adolescents and the families and the community. The second is the mental health aspect, working with Mark Dale here. We're also working with law enforcement, looking at the crimes and the driving under the influence, since Marin County per capita has one of the largest fatalities. And then Lori Fagoli, who's our district attorney. And then the last group that we're working with is how this affects other areas such as sex trafficking. You know that is a huge problem when one person brings in $250,000 per year. So how do they do it? They do it by the drugs. They get them addicted, they use them, and then they discard them on the street. So if you want to know more about it, come see me.
Thank you, Alyssa Ralston. First of all, I really want to congratulate everyone involved for all the hard work they're doing, especially the young people. You've really been fantastic. It's great. My question it's kind of a comment and a question. My experience in educating about this topic for a long time was that many young people, particularly in middle school, started vaping as a result of the backdoor channels, the social influencers, the people who were posting on Snapchat and showing videos and doing other things. And I'm wondering if our advertising campaigns are really looking at getting youth to do more of that informal advertising, which I personally believe is much more influential for young people than posters and buses, et cetera.
I just want to, the work that we do for the state isn't aimed at youth. I just wanted to point that out. It's aimed at adults to get the adults educated on the subject, because I agree that the way you reach youth is very different than the way you reach adults. Do you mind repeating the first part of your question, though, about the social media or?
Well, I was just saying my experience in working with middle school students was that most of them started because they saw posts of high school students who were social influencers, you know, the cool kids at school, the cheerleaders or the whatever. And I think these are the people who should be doing the education for youth.
Yeah, amen, right? If only they would. If, you know, Sophie Turner's Jewel wasn't like one of the biggest trending hashtags out there. Yes, and I think that's what the Truth Initiative is trying to do. They're trying to work that angle, trying to get celebrity to talk to youth, doing a lot of that within social as well.
I was going to add too, we have like the schools are doing some of their own little campaigns. For example, one of the campaigns that came out last year was called Escape the Vape. And a bunch of high school students did some events on campus, and they were Escape the Vape campaigns that they did locally. So there are things that are happening in the classrooms that might look different at every school, but they do exist. but they're individual and more localized.
I would like to add on to that by saying I am an intern for the YMCA Youth Court, which is where we use restorative justice to right the wrongs that teens and youth have done to the community. And I have also noticed that the teen-to-teen communication has been definitely most effective. Instead of hearing adults talk at us about an issue that they are not necessarily involved in firsthand, at least, it's a lot more impactful to hear from those in the community that are experiencing it firsthand. And I was also wondering if anyone knew what Juul, the company, is doing to combat what is happening, and if there are lawsuits or specifically surrounding restorative justice, if there is something they can do instead of paying a bunch of money to right their wrongs, instead maybe implementing programs into middle schools or high schools to fix the problems they have created.
I'll just start with that. I was on family vacation this summer, and our hosts had their kid, a friend from college, showed up, a young woman who had just been hired at Juul to work on, supposedly her job was to stop teen and underage youth. And I discussed with Jazzy and others whether I thought it was very fortuitous that I was already planning this, and here's this woman, and she said she had thought long and hard about taking this job and investigated it, and she really believed that she was coming in to do good work. And so we discussed whether to have her come today to explain what she's doing, but we thought it was just way too much of giving them a platform. So we'll definitely be looking at that. But I think that one of the concerns is, so they're going to be, working on these youth campaigns. But meanwhile, since they're being asked not or forced not to have the flavored products, they're clearly doing R&D on what their next item is going to be for sale.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to that. So recently, they're suing Juul right now because some of the youth, they have a youth tobacco prevention subsection of the company, Juul, and they went into some classrooms. There was a classroom in Richmond that they went into. They're paying school districts to come in and implement education in those school districts. They actually offered money to Marin County, and we said no. They are going into school districts, and they went into a classroom in Richmond, and they told the students, they had the teacher leave the room and told the students that their products was safe, it was just not meant for them. And the students actually have testified publicly at the federal level about what was taught to them in that classroom. And so, yes, they are trying to kind of right their wrongs in a sense, but some of those that we don't necessarily trust the prevention initiatives that they're doing because they're owned by the company that's trying to make money off of the product. So
I would just add to that it was well documented in advertising that the techniques that Philip Morris used in their parent and tobacco prevention education for youth were the least effective techniques. They had campaign, but it was not a campaign that would be effective in preventing youth use.
I just, so one other thing I wanted to add. I really don't, I personally don't believe Juul has any real good intentions with getting anybody younger off of their product. The former CEO was quoted when he was talking to the company about all of the trials and tribulations that they're going through, and his response to the company was, hey, shit happens, we'll get through it. So they don't care. He has since stepped down, and the new CEO of Juul is the former chief growth officer at Altria, who owns Marlboro. So when you have the former chief growth officer now running your company, they're looking for growth, and they know that addiction starts at age 13, 14. So I don't think their sites are, they're just going to get smarter.
Okay, final questions or comments? Oh, we have one here. Go ahead, Finn.
Final. Okay. Was the first question is do you have any data about the vaping product being widely used in the immigrant community or the low-income neighborhood in Marin County? And second one, are all the vaping products are manufactured in the United States or somewhere else?
Hello, hi. So I can speak to the first question. I didn't hear your second question. I'll ask for that question in just a second. But big tobacco, and like Ann has mentioned and many presenters today, they own companies, these e-cigarette companies, and they've all historically targeted minority populations. And so Marin County actually received a grant that I'll be working on with Jazzy and our team to work with Latinx, African American populations, and the LGBTQIA population as well, because there have been, there's data and evidence showing that these companies have specifically targeted. For example, the African American community was greatly targeted in the 1980s with menthol cigarettes. They would go in buses into African American communities and hand out cigarettes for free. Just one strategy that they used. They also pay cash, large amounts of cash to organizations that promote Latinx values in order so that they can lobby against anti-tobacco laws and policies in their communities. So yes, there is evidence of that. And your second question?
All the vaping product was manufactured in the United States.
Oh, if the vaping products are manufactured in the United States, I don't think so. Jazzy can speak to this.
So we have some of it that are being manufactured here, but a lot of the stuff that we see comes from other places. And if you look at prices and products, the cheaper products are usually being imported, and they have more different chemicals, aren't being regulated in any capacity. So when we have all these products coming in from all over the place, the cheaper products that aren't necessarily, shouldn't be going out to our communities are getting out there because of these products being imported from different locations.
And Jazzy, it's Pam. Coincidentally, on the way in, as I was listening to traffic and news on the 8s, I heard on KCBS that 95% of the delivery product, so the cartridges, the casing, are made in China. So some of it come here, so it doesn't really, they end up elsewhere where they're filled and their products are decided upon, their mix. I thought that was rather interesting that somebody steps down, somebody is very happy to fill the void. So it was just sort of timely. And if I could just answer also a quick question. We were talking about cessation avenues. I was so disturbed to have it pointed out that the FDA-approved products for cessation are all geared to adults. So people who are 18 to 21 and older, which meant that they really hadn't studied what it would take for somebody whose body was developing younger. I was also pleased that the 1-800-NO-BUTS cessation web call-in line will work with youth. They do have to have parental approval for somebody under 18, but assuming you've gotten to the I found a vape kind of point, and you've been successful in getting your youth to decide that they are willing to try and quit, they do have a program designed for youth. And don't forget that I would be remiss if I didn't make a plug in for Smoke-Free Marin, that there's lots of resources there as the co-chair. I want you to make sure to memorize that, smokefreemarin.com.
Yeah, I called the helpline last week, actually, because I was on a teleconference call, and they had talked about parent permission. And it came up on the call, and they said on the call 13 to 18 you don't need parent permission. So I call the helpline, and young people in our schools, anyone over 13 up to 18, do not have to have parent permission now to call the new vape line. And so that is a tremendous thing. And one other last thing I would like to say that Dr. Willis called me last week, now that we've gotten all these policies passed in each of our communities, he said, maybe it's a good idea, and I'd like to get a show of hands if you people feel that we could get the support of our politicians to do the same that they've done in Livermore and in San Francisco, and that is a ban on all of the tobacco vaping products.
Do you think we want it, or that we think it would work?
Do we think, first, do we want it?
Yes. Yeah.
If we do we think it will work?
Have an impact? Yeah. Social acceptability? Sure.
I think policies generate, as I said earlier, a discussion in the community, and that's the discussion and the education that leads to our understanding that this is something that we shouldn't be doing.
I can just add on that, like historically in tobacco control, the rates have been decreasing for many, many years. And part of that is because first we could be sitting inside this room and you could be smoking a cigarette, or you could be on an airplane smoking a cigarette. And over time, policies have passed that made it less convenient and less accessible. And that's what's decreased. They've increased taxes, which makes it less convenient. They've decreased locations where you're allowed to smoke. You can't smoke in parks, you can't smoke inside. You have to be in certain locations. And they've made it less accessible. You can't go into a store and buy the product. So historically, for like many, many years, that's why the rates were so low, is because policies were continuing to pass to decrease and limit those things. And so we're going based off of history, and that's why we're moving forward with policies. It's a key piece that we've seen has made an impact. However, with that said, it takes until the policies pass to really see what the outcome's going to be, right? So we hope that it goes in that direction like it has historically, but we'll see what happens.
Okay. Last quick question and quick answer here.
I just wanted to ask if we have this kind of forums and talks in Spanish, because we know we have a large Spanish community here in Marin County in general. I used to be the bilingual community liaison at San Rafael High School, and I was the one communicating with parents about their kids vaping and all that, and a lot of them don't have the knowledge or education about what it is or what it looks like or everything that's out there. So just wondering.
Yes, hello. And so I, working with BACR, speak Spanish, and I will be doing a presentation at Davidson Middle School on November 19th. And we will also be doing one, so I'll be doing one there. I did one with the Marin YMCA Youth Court with John Carney in Spanish. We are eager to reach out and educate the Latino population in Marin County and just provide resources and services as well. But right now, what we're doing mainly is doing presentations and trainings to parents and families. On November 19th, we'll be speaking to 100 families at Davidson Middle School, all Spanish-speaking, monolingual.
That's great. If you guys happen to videotape that, I would love to post that on the event page.
The date might be different, but we can confirm that with you. If anybody's curious, they can come to us and we can give you the right date.
Okay. Thanks everyone for your patience. This was such a tremendous discussion. I think we have a lot more to do, but we really appreciate you being here. Can we have a round of applause again for our students? Thanks for joining us.